Do you struggle with accountability in your organization? If you're listening to this, my guess is that your answer is probably yes. I'm Leslie Spees with Influence HR Consulting, and I see this problem quite frequently in companies that I have worked in the past and that I work with as a consultant. Session is on why accountability breaks down in growing companies and what you can do about it. Here's a couple of statistics that I think just kind of drive home the importance of accountability. 46% of managers were rated poorly on holds others accountable for their work in a Harvard Business Review study. And that's poorly, not mediocre, which indicates that it is a big opportunity in most organizations. Accountability is closely tied to employee engagement. Gallup found that employees were 3 times more likely to be engaged when accountability is good. And employee engagement has all kinds of positive business related statistics tied to it. Without accountability, some of the problems you may experience is performance slipping and staying there, your best people getting frustrated and leaving, issues getting ignored and problems lingering, drama and finger pointing, inconsistency across teams, and it feels unfair to employees, and growth in your organization slows down. I like to say what you permit, you promote. So let's say, for example, that you have an employee that comes to work wearing his pajama pants and you don't feel like dealing with it. So you don't say anything, you just kind of let it slide. Well, the next week you have another employee that comes to work wearing their pajama pants. And before you know it, the whole department is wearing their pajama pants. Essentially, you have promoted that behavior by not addressing it. Let's talk about what accountability is. I think a lot of times it gets a bad rap, but it's really a good thing. So it's clear ownership of responsibilities, actions, and results, along with the expectation that a person will follow through and take responsibility for both successes and failures. Well, accountability equals, show you a little formula, clarity, which is foundational. So you got to have clarity around what a person is being held accountable for. And then ownership and follow through can follow. What accountability is not, it's not a punishment. It's not micromanagement. It's not calling people out, and it's not blame. It isn't about being tough on people. It's about creating an environment where people can succeed and the business can grow. So, quick gut check. Just think about where accountability is breaking down for you. Clearly, we don't have participation opportunities because this is just a recording, but some of the things that I hear are missed deadlines, inconsistent performance, managers avoiding tough conversations. An example. So, this is an example that I have seen many times over the years as an HR professional. So, we have an employee, Debbie Deadline Misser. As her name indicates, she regularly misses deadlines on projects. So, Mary Manager comes to you as the HR person and says, I am really tired of dealing with Debbie. She keeps missing deadlines, and I think I just need to fire her. So, when you start asking some questions around, well, have you talked to Debbie? No, but she should know that she's missing deadlines. Do you have documentation of the deadline she's missed? No, it's just about on every project. Do you have any documentation that you've done of performance issues? No, don't have that either. So, really, Mary Manager is not in a position to fire Debbie Deadline Misser because she hasn't done her part of the job, which is to let Debbie know that a deadline is not a guideline. It's really the deadline. So, just a fictitious example that I have seen happen many times over the years. So here are the 5 top reasons, in my view, of why accountability breaks, and we'll go through each of these. The first is lack of clarity. And again, as I mentioned before, if you don't have clarity on roles and expectations, it is really hard to hold somebody accountable because they don't know what they're being held accountable for. So, lack of clarity results from unclear roles, fuzzy expectations, and if everyone owns it, no one does. You've probably seen that come into play in your background before. So, I'm going to share just a little example with a pit crew. And I don't know much about this, but I just thought it was a really good example. So you've got the person, and if I misspeak, just give me a little grace, but you got the person that elevates the car. You've got a couple of people on the left side to deal with the tires and on the right side to deal with the tires. You've got somebody that handles the fuel, and then you've got the person that releases the car to get back on the road. So let's say that somebody who is on the left side, supposed to deal with the tires, goes over to the right side or is trying to deal with the fuel, then it is going to slow down the amount of time that it takes for the car to get back on the road. So that is an example of how unclear roles can have a negative impact. So I liked this. Even highly skilled people fail when roles aren't clear, but average teams can outperform when they are. So very important and foundational. The second problem you may run into is when managers aren't equipped. So you have probably noticed, I've seen it many times over the years, that oftentimes people are promoted for performance in an individual contributor role, not for leadership, acumen, or ability. And lots of times that hasn't even been assessed. And we just assume that they are going to be able to figure out the emotional intelligence and leadership parts of the job without investing in development for them. And what happens a lot of times is that they don't really know how to do it, so they avoid feedback, particularly constructive feedback, and they don't really know how to hold people accountable effectively. And accountability really starts at that manager level. Ideally, you'd like to have a culture of accountability where employees are even holding team members accountable, but that is not going to happen unless it starts with your managers. Third reason would be inconsistent HR systems. So perhaps you've got an excellent onboarding system. However, your hiring process is a little bit broken and you're not bringing in the right people, or your performance management process is poor. There's no clear expectations, there's no method of giving people feedback. And so, really, kind of the whole system falls apart. When accountability just depends on the manager without having a system behind it, what happens is that it's really just luck as to whether somebody gets held accountable, and it's going to be inconsistent between departments. So, as part of my practice, I share the people in performance operating system because I feel like all of these things have to work together and be in sync in order to have an effective people function. All right, problem number 4, growth outpaced structure. So oftentimes when organizations grow, when you don't have a lot of employees and you're starting out, informal communication works pretty well. But as you have more people, you have more handoffs and it creates more confusion. And decisions that used to happen in the hallway or on the fly now get lost in the system. So I'll share an example. A commercial cleaning company that grew from 18 to 65 employees. So they added supervisors quickly. They promoted them on performance in their individual contributor role, but then they didn't develop them. New hires are onboarded inconsistently. There's no clear performance expectations across teams. And the owner was still the final decision maker for everything, which when you have 18 employees is probably okay. But when you get to 65, that's going to be a big bottleneck. So you can imagine that accountability and many things are going to suffer, and it's going to hold back growth of this company if they don't deal with some of these things. Number 5, avoidance culture. Nice replaces clear. So when a manager is just worried about being nice, a lot of times they're not going to have difficult conversations because it's kind of like people pleasing. They want everybody to like them. They want them to think that they are nice. So they're not clear, but really clear is kind. And you have to give people feedback and have tough conversations in order for them to grow and thrive. Leaders don't address issues early. So a lot of times I think they kind of stick their head in the sand and think, well, maybe this will work itself out, which rarely happens. Problems compound instead. So we'll talk through three practical shifts that you can make to improve accountability in your organization. So the first is to get crystal clear. You need to communicate what success looks like for every job, who owns what, and what done means. So clearly, Debbie Deadline Mister didn't know what done meant. She was operating with the deadline as a guideline. So, how do you do this? I recommend having a roles and responsibilities meeting at least once a year and then reinforcing expectations on a regular basis through the year. In that meeting, you would review the job description, making sure that it's updated and potentially create key results areas or KRAs. So, what that is really is just kind of a shorter form of the job description that has the top five most important things that are part of a job. And it's an interesting activity to have the employee come to the meeting with what they think those five things are, and then the manager shares their feedback and they have a discussion about it. And developing SMART goals. So when you have goals that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time bound, it defines all the things and things are more likely to get done. The second thing is to equip your managers. So, as I said before, it doesn't come naturally. They need to know how to give positive and constructive feedback in a motivational way, how to coach employees instead of always giving them advice and fixing, how to have difficult conversations, why accountability is important, and I teach 5 C's of accountability. So, they are clarity, courage, consistency, collaboration, and corrective action may be necessary if the other 4 C's don't work. So you need to make sure that that managers are familiar with your corrective action or discipline process and how to get that going. Then, after you've developed your managers, hold them accountable for accountability. Accountability is a leadership skill, it is not a personality trait. The third thing you can do is to build a simple system. So you don't have to do all these things, but these are some examples. So maybe a system of consistent check ins where managers are checking in with employees. It's a good idea to maybe develop a loose agenda for that because a lot of times what I see is the manager sits down with the employee and just kind of says, update me. And then after that's done, say, we'll see you next time. So having an agenda, promoting some two-way feedback as part of those meetings, making sure that expectations are clear. I think that's been a theme in this session for sure. Maybe doing the key results areas or an accountability chart, which is kind of similar. You just kind of take an org chart and list out the top 5 things part of each job. And that helps you ensure that there's not a lot of overlap and that everybody's clear on their piece of the puzzle. Effective management processes. So, not just having a performance review once a year. If you're doing consistent check ins, then that helps to fix that. But making sure you have all of the comprehensive performance management processes in place. So that includes feedback, it includes coaching, it includes goals, it includes corrective action when that's necessary, and it includes whatever process you're using for performance reviews, or my preferred method is performance conversations. And then accountability is kind of in the middle of all of that. Setting goals, that could be part of your performance management processes. But when you set those SMART goals, people are understand what they need to do and when they need to do it and all those things. And project plans for positions that are more project driven. So I've got a little accountability diagnostic for you here. I would encourage you just to pause the video. What I'd like for you to do is rate each statement on a scale of 1, strongly disagree, to 5, strongly agree. And what this will do is after you have rated these areas, it's going to give you some clarity on where you need to start to improve accountability in your organization. So clearly, if you have mostly fours and fives, you're in a pretty good place. Mostly threes, inconsistent situational accountability. Mostly ones and twos, there's probably a system breakdown. So again, look at where you were the lowest, and that's likely where you should start to improve things. Accountability doesn't break in most cases because people don't care. It breaks because systems and leadership habits don't scale. And there goes my dog. So you're not sure where to start. Of course, Influence HR has a few solutions that can help you. I'll just go through these quickly. We have the People in Performance Blueprint, and what that is an assessment that goes through all of the elements of the employee experience, gather feedback through a survey, focus groups from employees and leaders, and create a clear diagnostic blueprint of the things that are going well as the things that you likely need to fix to elevate your culture, and creates a 6 to 12 month action plan depending on the engagement. Performance and accountability framework. This is where I come in and help you build all the building blocks to ensure that you have better accountability in your organization. And the high retention manager leadership program is going to help prepare your managers because a big part of that deals with feedback, listening, coaching, and accountability because it's an important part of each leader's job. So I would encourage you, reach out if I can help you in any way. I'm happy just to have an initial coaching conversation with you if that is helpful. And I thank you for listening.